All right. Let's see whether this works or not. I'm trying to figure out some things. Yeah, it seems that my sound effects are working. Yay. Hello. I am Jonathan Albin, also known as Game Master J, or in the video games community as Commander Clueless. Very, very slightly known in the video games complex, if you will. I've run a few games of World of Tanks and a few others. But this is Jonathan Alvin, and this is Game Master's Soapbox. And this is going to be the first of my attempts to speak expositorily, I guess, in exposition on the nature of roleplay and the environment we are in now compared to the environments of which I've been a part for coming up on 50 years. I am a game master for role-playing games and have been involved professionally in that endeavor since the 90s, and before that all the way back to 1974 as a writer and player and game master. And matter of fact, I have probably the record of being one of the longest duration game masters with 48 years, whatever, since 1975, whatever that math is. I guess this is 2023, so we're coming up in 48 years as a storyteller and game master, utilizing such engines as the Dungeons and Dragons franchise throughout its duration in all of the various types, skipping only over the 4th edition, and at that point actually reverting back to 2nd edition for a few campaigns. And the story that I like to tell includes the fact that I've run games in virtually every form of RPG out there. And today I've got 6 topics listed here, and I want to talk about each one of them for about 10 minutes or so. So I anticipate that the show will last about an hour. Each of these will be broken up into 10-minute segments for separate releases as well into YouTube and other venues. So I'm going to go over really quickly in this little early snippet to kind of describe what we're going to be talking about. The first of them is the essence of social engagement and what it is about role-playing in particular that I believe suits a need that we as people endeavor to do all the time, but it gives a specific means for us to do so in a way that perhaps is more visceral, more human than perhaps our best, most professional public speaking engagements, or in any situation where we are trying to convey information, but we are also trying to carry forward perceptions that others might have of us and such. The second portion, Actors, Big Kids, and Dreamers, is talking about what we are, what we as human beings actually are in existence compared to what we portray in our communications and such. Then I want to talk a little bit about the elements of narration and how telling stories is itself a art form and a way for we as speakers and we as participants in stories have some limited control of that environment and why that's important. Then I'm going to go on a 1-minute rant. I've got a particular I can't remember the word right now, but I have one little petty thing that I have problems with in terms of role playing today compared to previous times and periods, and I want to go over those in that one. It says 1-minute rant. It'll probably be 1 minute of rant, and then the rest of that 10-minute block will be explaining why the rant is valid. Then after that, finally, if you will, during the latter parts of today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what I believe to be, if you will, the lead, that it should be the first portion of this video. And that is the concept of quantum dice. And I think it's going to change the world. Finally, and this is of course assuming that we have viewers that have any, I will be able to go through a short questions and answers period, going over perhaps any or all of these topics, as well as information that I believe that might be useful for you in making decisions about how to communicate with others going forward. So, as at this point I have been doing videos for about 3 years, it's not too surprising to me that my videos, when they first air, have little or no engagement, and I realize that there are a lot of other ways that I could convey this information. I'm a writer. I've written three books for the games business, and a total of 9 or 10 books, I can't recall, that have been published under my own name, and then as a ghostwriter I've written closer to 350 books or so in the last 7 years. With those kinds of things out there, it's easy to forget what it is you're trying to do, and so that's why I put up the outline so that I will stay on task and go into those. Pardon me also if I try to stay static and try to stay sitting still while I'm speaking, because I know that sometimes hand motions can be distracting, especially if they're out in the air and they don't make any sense or don't have any context. So, however, I am a human being, so yes, I get itches and scratches on my face and such. So that's a lot of apology. So I'm going to get on to this. So get ready. If you haven't watched my shows before, please stick around, get some idea of what it is that I'm talking about. If you like the videos, make sure that you indicate so below by clicking the little buttons. And also, if you like this kind of content, make sure you also follow my channel so you can get updates on whenever new material is released. I'm going to be endeavoring to releasing more efficiently. Some of you, and before I go on to the actual show, I need to stop and say that some of you may recall that I started a program at some time in the past called 1001 Days of Dedication, and I have ceased that. And as you may recall, I had a bout with Bell's palsy that prevented me from being able to speak coherently and without a distracting physical issue, and that was that the left half of my face stopped functioning. I couldn't move the muscles, I couldn't smile and such like, and so it was tough for me, and so therefore I suspended that 1001 Days of Dedication series really early. And I'm sure that there are those that go, yep, that's about par for the course. Just realize that the 1001 Days of Dedication are going to be kept track of in terms of number of episodes that I make from that point going forward. And as I get closer to the completion of that, I will do a countdown, if you will, to the last few days of that 1001. But that will be when I have literally 1,000 or more videos. So you'll be with me for a long haul if you stick through all of those. So now, getting on to the subjects. First of all, we're going to be talking about the essence of social engagement, and I'm going to be endeavoring in this video to specifically go over what it is that should be occurring in any social engagement, and the reasons perhaps why some of the videos that you've watched in the past miss the mark, or even in your own engagement with others that you haven't been able to connect with others. And as a person who struggles every day with whether or not the things that I'm saying are being heard, whether the messages I'm trying to convey are being accepted. The essence of social engagement comes down to a lesson that I really learned early on in my time with the U.S. Air Force, and that was that effective communication requires a 4-step process. The first of those is the awareness of the communications channel to make sure that you are on the same wavelength as your audience, as the person you're trying to have received the message. So once you can ensure that they are on the same page, then you have to constantly remember to keep checking back to make sure you're still on that, if you will, same page. In this case, I'm doing it through video, and so this is only the first step of the 4-step process that I'm actually engaging in here. So I want to make sure that you stay with me, if you will, through this portion at least, so that you'll have an understanding of how social engagement should function. And the second portion of that, other than checking in, is the process of communicating. And that is being very clear about what it is you're trying to convey, and conveying that with conviction, with clarity, and with content. If I got on here and just made noise, there would be some of you that might see that as social engagement because I'm creating video, I'm putting something out there in the world. But that is not communication. That is only a first furtive step of that. So the first thing I've got to do is convey information. And so I will be doing that in this portion. That conveyance will be the message of what it takes to engage socially. So having said that, are you with me? Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you hearing the words that are coming out of my mouth, as Jackie Chan would say? All right, so anyway, I'm going to mess that quote up. So anyway, so the second step beyond conveying information, and I'm going to come back to this again in more detail in a moment, but the next step beyond conveyance is coherence. And that is that the words that you say match the message you're giving, so that you don't lead somebody off into a wild goose chase or such like. As a storyteller, I tend to be fairly careful to be concise when I need to be concise, and to exposit ad infinitum, as the case may be, and sometimes I run past my subject. But the coherency is important. So I've got to have the actual communication process, which is the message. I've got to have something to say. And then finally, I've got to have content. I've got to have something that, as I'm saying it, is going to hold value to you. I trust that the ability to communicate with others will be useful to you as well. But beyond those things, then now I've lost count. There we go, distracted. Within the social engagement, therefore, there has to be the conveyance of information, there needs to be the reception of that information, and then there needs to be some way, some means of collecting feedback, and that is to get information back. So I believe that the YouTube and Twitch channels that are out there all are really trying to communicate, and communication is as I said, a 4-step process. I've got to convey the information. I have to be clear and concise with that information. I have to have content information. But the next step beyond just the conveyance of that information is the reception of that. Now, if you've been with me this grand total of 6 or 8 minutes, great. We're on the way, because I've conveyed information to you, and now you perhaps have received it. When you speak, therefore, you have to make sure that the audience has the capability and the desire to hear what you have to say. And this is about positioning. It's about where you place the information. It's how you connect with people through that information, and the assurance that the information that you are presenting isn't buried in odd sounds or noise and such. And that's the reason why, if you notice, I have no background behind me. I just use the black, because I want to make sure that I keep you centered on the conversation as I presented it. So getting a person to hear the information requires you to have spoken it in a way that they know that it is to you, it is to you that they are speaking. So in this case, if it wasn't clear, I am speaking to anybody who does communication through online methodology, through storytelling, and most directly to those who are game masters and storytellers in their own right. I want to convey to you this message that the essence of social engagement is a matter of following all four of these steps, and I'm probably all over the board. And doing so, making sure that you've gotten the message out and they have been able to receive it. Okay, so the next portion beyond the broadcast of the information, the conveyance of that information, and the collection of that data by the target audience, the final step of that is feedback. And I believe that feedback is probably where I personally have been the poorest in terms of the process. Feedback is when you as the viewer feedback to me what you feel or need to get to completely understand what it is that I'm saying. So in this case, for example, the greatest way of communication feedback is for you to go ahead and jump into the chat channel here and make yourself known and let me know that what I'm saying is being heard by anybody. Now, I currently can scan down below and see that I currently have a viewership of 1, which is me watching the channel to make sure everything's going okay with the video. But in the longer term, your communication feedback back to me to let me know that the message has been received is for you to post either in the chat conversation while the show is going on or down below in the comments section. And I do read everything that's ever posted. I know there's a lot of people that say never read your own feedback because it break you, crush you, destroy you, whatever. But the reality is that it is a necessary part of communication. It's an extremely important part of social engagement because if I'm going to be portraying information to you, I need to know what you feel or what you hear about my expression and what you took away from it to make sure that I know that you received the message that I intended. Alrighty, so now when we're talking about this essence of social engagement, we've gone through the basics. You've got to convey the information. You've got to make sure that your audience can hear it. You need to make sure that they feed back. There's a fourth part, and the fourth part is verification, and that is completion of the communication cycle. So as I present the information to you, and I expect that you are hearing me, I'm checking with you and I'm getting feedback to make sure that that is going on. But more importantly, I've got to then relate back to you that I'm aware that you now understand it. Because if I've completed the circuit, so to speak, if I've completed the cycle of social engagement, I now have the opportunity to hear anything that you have to say, and then I can then respond in kind by listening, receiving, and then feeding back to you based on that information. So consider conversations or interactions with me to be a communications circuit, both outward to you and from you back to me. So realize that, therefore, the essence of social engagement in this case will include my response to any feedback. So now, if your feedback is essentially the comments of somebody who is trolling or wanting to cause trouble or whatever, the communication circuit will be completed simply because I will either delete or ignore the message if it's egregious, or maybe my response will be just to acknowledge that I have received it. In which case, either I have no commentary back on it, or it's evident from the conversation that your comment was rhetorical. All right, so just realize that in any place or any situation that you are conveying information, you need to follow these 4 steps. Now, I'm probably preaching to the choir to most of you. Most people understand this process. You can't have a conversation if you don't speak what you're trying to say and then listen for their feedback and respond to make sure that they got the message. But I just wanted to make sure that we cover that really clearly, because I don't want to leave anything on the table when it comes to this, because I'm very passionate about what I believe about communication, what I believe about storytelling and being a game master. And so by hammering down the essence of social engagement, then you'll know on each of the other pieces that we go through. I will be reading your responses and relating to them in such a way so there'll be additional feedback in future episodes. Now, I don't know that I'll use the Game Master Soapbox every time. I have several other titles under which I broadcast, all on this channel, of course. Creative Differences, where I engage with other creators and what they do in their processes that could be creatively helpful to myself, or more importantly, could reach out to the viewers and give them new insights. I also have Making Believe, where we talk about the very creative process itself. And in the future, I will be also doing long-form communication through Twitch, where I will actually be utilizing the time online to actually write and create. And not only will you guys be able to interact with the information and watch the actual material being created, but it'll also give you an opportunity to ask questions during the process, which will be more front of mind, if you will, top of mind for me, as I'm spreading it and sharing it with you, and therefore helping you with perhaps your own creative processes. Alrighty, so we have covered in about 4 minutes, 5 minutes, what I was attempting to convey under the essence of social engagement. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure you drop those below or in the chat while we're continuing, so that I can respond to those in kind and therefore complete the communications process as I've outlined it. Okay, so now we're going to change gears, if you will, to actors, big kids, and dreamers. And all of us in our lives have taken on all 3 of these roles at different times. And I would argue that quite a few times most adult human beings fall into the first of these categories, the actors, more than they fall into the category of big kids. And then finally, far, far fewer, a very minority of people, a very small minority of people actually live in the place of being dreamers. And we're going to be talking about all 3 of them individually in this next portion. Actors is my way of describing not only the actual process of taking on a role, fitting into a particular position, and speaking as if I'm in that location, but actors also is my way of describing those who are trapped, if you will, in adult bodies, but are pretending to be something they're not. I could get in a whole lot of trouble here by saying specific groups that fall into this, such as teachers, maybe politicians, perhaps even in certain cases, worship leaders and preachers, priests and such like. The issue of being an actor is that you're not actually experiencing that role when you are portraying it. You are presenting it so that others can respond to it, and you're portraying it in a way so that there's an audience that can see it, but it's not necessarily, matter of fact, it probably isn't specifically who you are or what you are about. The actor in all of us, for example, I can give you a personal example of, I was married for a considerable number of years, and during that period, those periods of time that I was married, I was an actor in that I was fulfilling the role of a husband, a leader of a family unit, if you will. I know that may be controversial in today's time for me to say that I was a leader in the family, but that was my role as a member of a community that held specifically Christian views. The concept of being a husband carried with it the concept of guidance and leadership. And in many cases, I portrayed that role, but I was only acting. I wasn't truly invested in the role, if you will. I'll get into that in more details, but my only reason to mention that is that once I returned to the field of dreams? No, the field of nightmares, that is being single. The realization that I had been acting a large portion of my adult life in the role of being a husband, became pretty apparent. Now, the reality is that most of us are just big kids. Actually, let me rephrase that. Most of us stay in that actor role. In all cases, we just change the acting bit. We change from role to role. As a matter of fact, I believe this may explain why there's so much confusion in the world today that people are feeling when they say things like, I need to find myself, or I need to understand where I'm coming from, and I need to explore my identity and such. These are all basically cries for, when do I get to be me? When do I get to portray what's in here? Because we have set up frameworks, these roles that we have set for ourselves, whether it be the role as a teacher, the role as a student, the role as a husband, father, child, worker, co-worker, supervisor. Those are all fundamentally roles that we step into, and we get stuck so far behind the different roles that we forget who we are. Now, some of us have already acknowledged this. Some of us have been able to escape the vortex of power that these actor roles have created for us, and we're just a bunch of big kids. I'm reminded constantly that we don't grow up, we only grow old. The idea that we are the same people we were when we were in 4th grade and in our senior year in high school and our 4th year at university and our X number of years of marriage or whatever. These roles that have overcome us and put us out of the position of being big kids made us forget that there's a need, a necessity for humanity to be playful. And many cases, the idea of being big kids can only be seen in those positions where people have already elevated themselves above the economic. They've gotten to the point where their income and their desire to express information has gone beyond just their needs that the roles came into existence to fulfill. I think of the arguably the most powerful people in America today, in global terms, are those who are the ultra rich, the super rich, the Elon Musks, and name your politician here. Name your celebrity here. Anyone who's gotten to the point where they can just say, "Hey, I just want to live the life I want to live, and I'm not gonna be those other roles any longer." Mr. Beast is a person I perceive as being a big kid. He just has gotten to the point where what he does, as if you may not even know who he is, but person by the name, the character name of Mr. Beast, talking about a role, is a person who has taken his live stream, or rather his video YouTube channel to heights that the rest of us can only dream of. And in doing so, he lives out a life of a big kid. He does what feels right, what he sees as being important or necessary, or attention gathering, or et cetera, all the different things that he needs. But he does them all in that persona, that concept of being a big kid. So ironically, he's turned what is really for all of us the reality, and he's turned them into a particular character so that he can fulfill the things that occur in the big kid's brain. Now realize that big kids aren't necessarily ever anybody who's big. That concept of big kids isn't referring necessarily to the level of success that you have in the process, but what it does refer to is that you're not bridled by other roles being placed on you. You're able to be who you are at all times. One of the things that I've always said in my career is all the different jobs that I've had, all different occupations, I've never been one who played well with other children. And what I mean by that is I'm a big kid and I want to pursue things the direction that I want to take them in, and I'm not really very good at following the direction of others or staying within my lane, so to speak. And the difference, I guess, between actors and big kids is that the big kids are perfectly capable of staying in their lane when they need to, such as I have in the places where I've had occupations, but they also have the reality that they are not their role. They are grown-up human beings that can make their own decisions. And it doesn't matter to them what the rest of the world says. Whereas those who are actors simply stay behind the comfort of their shields and their roles and pursue their attempts at success by following the pathways that others have laid. Now, the final portion of this, the very small portion, and I've only got a couple more minutes left for this, are the dreamers. And a dreamer is somebody who can not only acknowledge that he has a position as a big kid, but he's got something that's driving him beyond that. And I believe this is where I've actually gotten to in my life. As many of you who have watched my videos before know, I've got a great passion for sharing my creativity with others, but I also have a greater intensity on helping you develop your creativity and bring out your dreams. And a dreamer is somebody who doesn't just see the future as themselves. They see the future as some place or some way in which they can help others, because it's only when we get past ourselves that we can actually attain any kind of real success. It's when what we do matters to others that makes the difference. So in this case, the elements in there, the concept of being a dreamer is becoming somebody who sees the bigger picture, sees beyond the big picture, sees their own role in it, and then finds ways to make that portion of themselves, the real self, the big kid, convey that information so that you catch that enthusiasm and see the same direction that we're all headed. Now, having said that, I do want to take a minute and thank you for watching the video so far. If you have appreciated things that you've seen so far, make sure that you like the channel. Go ahead and follow this specific Twitch channel for new releases as they come out. And also, if you want additional information, you can find out more about me by connecting with my Patreon account at patreon.com/Nykos, N-Y-C-O-S, as written. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the elements of narration. Now, narration is often poo-pooed in video environments because, after all, the purpose for being a video is that you can present that information through a visual media. But narration is more than just stating the facts of the situation. The conversation that we're going to have now are about the elements of narration and how to achieve successes through all of them. And the first element of narration is just the facts, man. It's just the details. It's the bare bones framework upon which you're going to build the narration. When you are telling a story, therefore, you have to have an idea of what that story is going to be and you have to be able to convey it quickly and coherently and concisely so that you can move on to the other parts of the story, such as the action, the drama, etc. So, the elements of narration include the following, and I'm going to blurt them all out and try to cover them all, but not necessarily in the order in which I state them. So, pardon me. So, the first element of narration is the facts. You have to have a framework of the facts. The next portion about the narration needs to be a context for the hearer. If I tell you a story, but I don't give you terms, maybe perhaps names or places, maybe experiences and feelings, if I don't give you a way for you to grab a hold and purchase that narration, it will do me no good. A friend of mine just mentioned that in some of my materials, I do perhaps an overly extensive amount of details. I make sure that the information I want to convey is stated, and that is not necessarily the purpose of a narration. It isn't necessarily to convey all of the information, but rather to give a framework by which the players or the participants, the viewers, can get a hold of what you're trying to say. So in this case, the establishment of the facts of the case has to be rooted in an understanding of the audience you're trying to reach and what their toleration is for, if you will, exposition. For example, an element of narration might be something known as an establishing shot. I might describe a specific location in greater or lesser detail so that when we start to understand what's going on in the story, we have a framework for where that story has occurred or where it's going to happen. This establishing shot is seen in many movies. As a matter of fact, nearly every movie utilizes this concept of setting up an establishing shot so that you know where the rest of the action is going to occur. In other words, if you're going to have a action upon a ship's cabin, then you'll probably start with a establishing shot that is a ship, and whether that be an ocean-going vessel or a starship or other conveyance, that concept has to be shown in the larger scale so that there's a comprehension. So this establishing shot captures that in a visual image or in a short narrative. For example, in the case of the classic, It Was a Dark and Stormy Night. I haven't specified where we are. I haven't described anything other than when we are. We're at night, and then I've given adjectives, dark and stormy. Well, just about every night last time I checked, unless you live in Alaska or other places above the Arctic Circle, there the concept of night is dark. But a dark and stormy night gives more of a sense to the location. So the establishing shot not only should give an idea of where the action is going on, but a feel for the environment of that establishing shot. So, for example, if I were going to give a description of a school building, then just saying school building is great. But if I say it's a school building near you, now your brain's going to engage with the words I've said and convey into that story specifically any school you might know in the area. I might say, it's the establishment, instead of being a location or a time, maybe I'll give an explanation of somebody in the scene, a person, how tall they are, where they're standing, that kind of thing, to give an idea of that. In any case, that establishing shot gives a point that the story begins. And it's important to know that all stories need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you don't provide a solid beginning, it's hard for the players to know, or the individuals or the audience to know when we're going to move on. As a matter of fact, this very outline that I've got up here on this side is sort of my skeleton, which is the facts of the establishment. But until I actually drew attention to them and say this is now the area of the elements of narration, you wouldn't know where we are in this outline, and you wouldn't know what I was talking about. So now that we've established narration, I can give additional information. Now, what does a narration need to require beyond the original setup, the initial location, the establishing shot? We need to have the expectation. In motion pictures, the expectation almost always is a sound. There'll be a siren someplace, a radio call-in, sound of feet running. There'll be some auditory trigger that lets you know that the narration has begun. For example, in the case of an audio version, you can think of motion pictures like Lord of the Rings. In the case of all three of Peter Jackson's movies, it starts off with a musical interlude reminiscent of the Elven people, and then there will be a voiceover, and the voiceover will beginning the narration. It will tell you where we are in the story, what's going on, and if not, it's going to at least draw some kind of information to something in the scene that they want us to focus on. Once we've established the location, once we've established the motive, what it is we're trying to have as an expectation for the narrator to get to, we then get through the narration process as quickly as we can, providing as much information we can in a short period of time without revealing too much. So the point of a narration is not to overburden the viewer or the hearer with too much information, but it is the idea of gathering the information in a concise manner, edible, consumable, in such a way that the viewer or the hearer will be able to begin the expectation of it and move towards your, as the speaker's, purpose. The final piece of a narration has to be, the question, and that is the reactionary part. We've already made a call to action. We've talked about the expectation, but now the actual trigger of call to action, beginning of the scene, the cutoff point for the narrator to step out of the way and for the actual story to begin. This is critical in being a narrator for role-play games. It's important for motion pictures. It's important for any communication. Even in a school classroom, it's the objective of the teacher to draw the attention of the viewer, of the students in, get them ready to learn, and then begin to share the information that they need in whatever venue, whether it be problems or narrative discussions of the outcome. Whatever, the purpose of it is to begin the action by having the conclusion of that be the call to action. Alrighty, so important to know, if you're telling a story, you need to have these elements of narration in place so that the listener, the reader, the viewer will be able to follow what's going on and enact accordingly. Okay, now we're time for the 1 minute rant, and I'm going to set my little clock here right at 40 minutes after the hour by the clock I have on the wall here, and I'm going to attempt to keep my initial commentary or my initial rant down to just that 1 minute. Give me a few seconds here. We're counting down the clock. Alrighty, we are going to talk today. Our 1 minute rant is on character prioritization. One of the things that has happened in role-play games and in advertising, motion pictures, reading books, etc., is that our culture has shifted its focus to character prioritization. And in particular, in the role-play environment, this means that the storyteller's portion or his purpose in the game has been shifted by this very process away from his original intent or the things that make a game master's position useful, and basically disrupts that. By character prioritization, I mean to say that the persons who play in a role-play game at this point in time, if they are coming into a brand new, are coming in with the expectation that the information that they come to the game table with is literally all that you need to know about them, and that there's nothing that can be discovered in the game process that isn't already defined in their character. I have to tell you that this drives me crazy when a person comes to a games table or comes to a session and they say, all right, this is my view of the character. This is what I think they're going to be like. I believe that there's going to be this many kinds of communication, but they're going to have these are their objectives and these are the things they're going to accomplish. Check mark A, check mark B, check mark C, check mark D, check mark F, and so on, all the way through ad infinitum. That's all already been created in terms of the character before the very first die is rolled, the first scene is described. Their character's priority has taken over. And this is driving me crazy, and I've run out of my 1 minute already. So that will be the end of it. Just realize that I will do this more later. Character prioritization, making the characters more important than the story, drives me insane. All right. Now, as I said, the rest of this 10-minute block will be a discussion of the character prioritization issue. Let's go back to when role-play games were originally devised. At that point in time, players who participated in games, and by that I'm referring to tabletop games of all manner, whether they be war game simulations or abstract score-based games or skills, games of skill versus games of chance versus games of pure imagination. In all of those cases, the player was playing a singular role. He was a playing piece, if you will, in the environment. Now, in the case of role-play games, yes, character development did begin with the first creation of the character. But just realize that the concept of creating a character was actually external to the player. It was something that the player did numerically, mathematically, on a piece of paper, wrote down everything, etc. But that role was simply as a participant. He was the guy that rolled the dice. He's the guy that moved the mice. He was the guy who chose which units moved when. He was the effective agent for the progress of the game. He wasn't in particular a character. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the basic mechanic was you built the character by rolling dice, looking at those numbers, and then finding a way to conform yourself into the role as defined by the numbers. In other words, if the character that you rolled had high strength, there was an expectation you would be involved in martial conflicts in some fashion. You would be doing feats of physicality. If you had a high intelligence, you were expected to be involved in educational pursuits, intelligence, smart things. You would be the thinker of the group. You would be utilizing your intelligence to activate or create spells. So it was the concept that a greater mind, a smarter person would more easily handle the powers of mystical nature. And of course, in our world today, the people who are the smartest can, if you will, convey that they are the magicians in the world because they have the knowledge to make things happen. I have personally seen this in my case with my parents because neither my mother nor my father ever were involved with computers in any way other than as a keyboard player. They participated with hitting the keystrokes, but my dad honestly believed that the internet and eBay were the same thing, and he was terrified of going online, as the saying goes, because he knew that that meant that he probably would spend something, and he didn't want to be involved with that. So the idea of character prioritization never crossed his mind. Now, if we go back even further, if we go back to our individual childhoods, when we were children, we certainly did character prioritization in that we would choose which role we wanted to play in terms of, if you're in the playground and the group says, hey, we'd like to play hopscotch, you would decide whether or not you wanted to play hopscotch or not, and then you would act on that. And if you were wanting to be a person that was a team player, so to speak, you would participate with whatever the group was doing. And that the process of becoming the person who says, hey, we're going to do X and have everybody do it, was, if you will, a means of beginning the concept of leadership. Because if you could convey to people, hey, this is something really cool to do that we should do together, then you could get them to join with you in that shared experience, but that you would then therefore be, if you will, a priority in the storytelling, if you will. Now, most of us have played those kind of abstract, no rules involved, silly environments when we were kids, whether it be classic, cops and robbers, or shall I say, Native Americans and cowboys. I don't know how to say that properly because that's now a taboo subject. But you would take on a role in a story, whether maybe even playing house. I can remember my children. My daughter was one who sort of was the game master. She would say, we're going to play house, and you're going to play my son, and you're going to play the crazy old man next door who's yelling at us all the time, and you're going to play the school teacher or whatever. And so that process still required somebody to provide guidelines, but the idea of prioritizing your individual character to the exclusion of all others or to the detriment of any was anathema. If you were a soldier, you were a soldier. You followed the instructions of the commander that you've chosen in the game environment. So if somebody says, hey, I'm going to be the captain, everybody says, okay, well, that person's going to be the captain, and you went with that role. This changeover, this concept of character prioritization, I believe started somewhere in the helicopter parent positioning of our world, that somehow when the children were elevated to where the parents hovered around them to make sure they were safe, but let the children do whatever they wanted to and let them run amok, so to speak. This was the start of character prioritization. Now, I'm going to get backlash, I'm sure, that somebody's going to go, wait a minute, I feel my character is really important, but I built the character that I want to play in the story, and who are you as a lowly game master to tell me how I should develop that? But my point is that the prioritization, the elevation of a player's desire actually overshadows reality. Because how many of us, and if you're honest with yourself, how many of you are currently doing exactly what you intended to do when you were 10 years old as an adult? I would hazard a guess that it's not very many of us. There are a few. Arguably, at 11 years old, I decided I wanted to be a storyteller as a part of my life, but I never dreamed that it would actually be the occupation that it's become. It wasn't like I'm going to be a storyteller and that's all I'm going to do. And obviously not. I've been, as I go through the litany all the time, I've been an air traffic controller, I've been a microwave antenna installer, a cellular technician, I've owned a trucking company and a moving company and a window washing company and a landscaping company. All these things that I've owned and been a part of were roles that I played, going back to the actors. Callback. The actor positions in my life, but they were not actually the concept that I prioritized what I wanted to accomplish to the exclusion of any other possibility. And I think that's where the problem really lies, is that we today expect our character to define who we're going to be and then we're going to be that for all of our life in game, and that's not how reality works. All right, so I'm gonna get off of my soapbox now, and thank you for the 1 minute rant, which actually took me more than 10 minutes, but finally we're gonna get down to the real meat of this conversation. Alrighty, so we're now going to talk about a subject that I feel is really essential in today's world that we start to take a serious look at, and that is the idea of a die roll in any game. Now, as I say these words, I believe you're going to not understand where I'm going, so just follow me on this. In any game where you are rolling a die or plural dice, you have some purpose for that. You have some target number that you are attempting to match or exceed to achieve something. So, in Monopoly, you're going to pick up the dice, you're going to roll it with the intention of hoping to get a certain space, to get just past that big rent hotel that you didn't want to hit, or to achieve getting to Boardwalk and making that purchase when nobody else has gotten there yet. This concept of the roll your dice and determine the action from a succeed or fail method is as old as dice themselves. And while there may be game elements that have utilized what I'm going to refer to next, I don't believe it's been perceived in this way. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is open your brain for a second and look at a die roll. And let's just assume, for the sake of this discussion, that we're looking at a 6-sided dice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the only sides on this die. You all can visualize what that is, because the majority of us have at least one of them in our house. And if we've got Yahtzee, we got 5. So, now, assuming that you have one die, and you have a target of 3 or better. In many cases, it would be written as a 3+. That means that my dice roll will be a success in game if I roll a 3, 4, 5, or 6, because it was 3+, so 3 or better. But if we roll a 1 or a 2, complete failure. Now, how many people that are in their lives today, sitting here watching this video, at the beginning of their high school, at the beginning of their university, said, I am going to get my degree, and I'm going to do exactly what I have trained to do as an adult. I'm going to make that exact linear move on one roll of the die, one completion of that school. I'm going to go from what I am to something completely else on one die roll. I would hazard a guess that that happened for exactly no people on Earth. I don't believe that we achieve what we are attempting to do by hitting a specific die roll marker. Now, in every game that I can think of, and majority of games that have ever been made, one die roll meant a success or a failure. Now, there are games that use multiple dice. There are Fate systems, there's Shadowrun, there's a bunch of them that use a dice pool, and then you count the number of successes as your success. But that itself is a threshold, because it's that number or nothing. If you roll below that, you have failed. So, now that I've said that, what if when you roll one dice, or one pair of dice, or one die roll, or dice roll, you're going to be able to come up with not 1, not 2, but at least 4 results. That'd be something that'd be fascinating and powerful, right? If you could have a die roll, for example, they gave you not only an abject, one absolute success or higher, but you had a partial success. what would limit you from having a die roll that gave you a partial success on the single die roll? What if that same die roll could give you a extremely wild success? Something that way achieved more than you expected. And then what if there was a perfect? What if you had a perfect? So off of one die roll, you're getting 5 outcomes. Now we're going to get even better. What if there was a 6th one that was complete and abject failure compared to just didn't succeed, compared to I partially succeeded, compared to I did succeed, I got a wild success, or things went perfectly? That would be 6 or more. So with all of that, with all of these possibilities coming off of one die roll, then the ground under which we stand, upon which we stand, is now shaken. Because if one die roll can give you 5 or 6 responses, there are so many more things that we can do in a game environment. For example, if you have, let's say, for example, we're familiar with the idea of you roll dice and move, that many spaces. What if you got to move an extra space for a wild success? What if we got to move 2 extra spaces on a perfect success? And what if we not only had a partial failure, but maybe only moved part way? Each of those possibilities occur in any one die roll if you use the kind of a mechanic that I've come up with for NycosRPG. And the first time I've really mentioned NycosRPG. NycosRPG is my baby. It's a role-play games mechanism that is going to be useful for multiple genres. At current, it's available in the fantasy setting under the brand title Dark Shards, which is the first of the properties that I've published in the role-play games environment. It is a complete fantasy settings book that includes, well, not a settings book, but a game mechanism book that covers all of the possibilities that you might use in a fantasy setting, including the creation of new magical effects, the methodology for advancement of the characters on an ongoing basis. But having said that, this idea of the quantum die roll, and we are almost out of time here, so I'm really getting out of the bottom. The point of this quantum die rolling is that if you've heard me, then the next episode I'm going to be doing will be actually discussing how the quantum dice work. And I'm going to ask you to be involved with that. So make sure that you let me know. Remember, feedback. You either provide information to me in the chat if you get to it during the show, which I don't think is going to happen now that we're coming down to the minute, although it could, or put it in the comment section so that I know that you are interested, and I will send you a invitation to that live stream event when we actually go over quantum dice and how they work. I'll be doing that tomorrow, more than likely midday tomorrow. So, or no, not midday. Well, maybe. Anyway, contact me as quickly as you can so we can get you into that episode. We will be doing additional information about this. Some of my players already are aware of it, and so you can feel free to contact them through the game store. As you notice, this nice little logo down here in the lower corner. This stands for Board Games Paradise, who is one of my sponsors, and it's the game store that I currently frequent. That is a full service game store, covers every type and style of games imaginable. It is a retail location in Redlands, California. For more information about them, you can go to boardgames.com or boardgameparadise.com, I should say. Or you can reach out to me through this channel or through my other social media, NycosRPG.com. Alrighty, so now, at this point, we have, it appears we don't have any viewers online that wish to communicate with us other than Challenging Gundu, which I'll respond to him after the fact. It looks like it's actually a spam attack or a spam thing because he put in a link, so I'll probably be dispatching it, so I won't be able to see that when you come back on the channel later. So make sure you leave me a comment below or on this, and I'll also be posting each of these segments on to YouTube in the near future. In the meantime, I want to thank you for being a part of this. If you like what you saw, make sure you like and follow us. If you didn't like what you watched, thank you for your time. I'm stealing that blatant response from a very good friend of mine over at Nerdrotic. He's a friend of mine from my side. He doesn't even know who I am yet, but I like the way he does that. So yeah, if you don't like what I did as a video, thank you for sticking with me through to the end. If you want more information, you can check out my Patreon account, patreon.com/Nykos, NYCOS, or you can also check out NycosRPG, which is my website. So thank you for that, and I will catch you guys on the next show. Make sure that you provide me feedback so I can respond to you soon. Take it easy.